So, what if I told you that a janitor with no financial training whatsoever could end up way wealthier than some high-flying finance executive with a Harvard MBA? Sounds crazy, right? Well, today we're going to dig into why financial success is often less about how smart you are and way, way more about how you act.
And no, this isn't just some hypothetical question. This is a real story, and it completely flips everything we think we know about money on its head. So how on earth did a guy who spent his days fixing cars and sweeping floors manage to build a fortune worth millions? The answer, you'll see, is in the tale of two men, two completely different lives.
Okay, so in one corner, you've got Ronald Reed, a guy with a really simple background, worked as a gas station attendant and a janitor. And in the other corner, Richard Fiscone. We're talking Harvard MBA, big shot finance career, the whole deal. Now, if you just looked at their resumes, you'd bet all your money on who ended up richer, right? Well, you'd lose that bet.
I mean, Ronald Reed's life was, well, it was just ordinary. He was the first person in his entire family to even graduate from high school. He bought a small house and lived there his entire life. He was known for being super frugal. Seriously, nothing about this guy's lifestyle would ever make you think, wow, there's a millionaire.
But then, when he passed away back in 2014, the secret came out. His net worth? A jaw-dropping $8 million. So what was his secret? Some brilliant stock pick? A lottery win? Nope. He just saved what little he could, put it into solid blue-chip stocks, and then he did the one thing most people can't. He was patient. For decades. That was his superpower. Just patience.
All right, now let's flip back to Richard Fiscone. This guy was the textbook definition of making it. He was so successful, he retired in his 40s to become a philanthropist. He lived in this massive mansion. I'm talking 11 bathrooms, 2 elevators, 2 pools. But here's the catch. That whole lavish lifestyle, it was all built on a mountain of leverage and insane spending.
Get this, just the maintenance on his house cost $90,000 a month. So when the 2008 financial crisis hit, poof, his whole world just collapsed. The guy with the fancy degree and the brilliant career, he went bankrupt. The philanthropist was broke.
So how in the world did the janitor win? This story is the perfect, and I mean perfect, example of what we're talking about today. The idea that money isn't really about spreadsheets and complex formulas. It's not a hard science, it's a soft skill. It's all about your behavior. And that is so much more important than the fancy stuff you might know.
Okay, so if behavior is the name of the game, what actually influences our financial success? Well, we've got to start by talking about two huge forces that we usually try to ignore: luck and its identical twin, risk.
And for this, let's take a look at Bill Gates. We all know the legend, right? The genius, the hard work. But there's another side to that story that often gets overlooked. You have to remember, back in 1968, a computer wasn't something you had in your pocket. These were giant, super expensive machines. You'd find them at a university, maybe a huge corporation, but a high school? No way.
So in 1968, think about this, there were something like 300 million kids of high school age in the entire world. That is a massive number of kids with talent and smarts and potential.
But out of all those 300 million kids, only about 300 of them went to this one particular private school in Seattle called Lakeside. And through just a wild series of lucky breaks, Lakeside happened to have a computer.
Do the math on that. The odds of being a teenager in 1968 who got to use a school computer, it's literally about 1 in a million. And Bill Gates just happened to be one of them. He says it himself, if it weren't for Lakeside, there would be no Microsoft. That's luck, plain and simple.
But here's where it gets crazy. Luck always has a shadow, and that shadow is risk. At Lakeside, Bill Gates had a best friend named Kent Evans. Bill says Kent was just as smart, just as into computers as he was. He was certain they'd start Microsoft together. But before they could even graduate, Kent died in a mountaineering accident. And what are the odds of that happening? Yep, also about 1 in a million. So you have one person's life changed forever by 1 in a million luck, and another person's potential completely erased by 1 in a million risk. They are literally two sides of the exact same coin.
Okay, so that leads us to the next big idea, and this one is all about what's going on inside our own heads. It's about understanding the incredible power of one simple word: enough.
There's this awesome story about the writer Kurt Vonnegut. He's at this glitzy party thrown by a billionaire hedge fund manager, and his friend leans over and says, You know, that guy makes more money in one day than you've made from your most famous novel in your entire life. And Vonnegut, without missing a beat, just says, yeah, but I have something he will never have. Enough.
And that just nails it, doesn't it? This whole game of social comparison, of looking at what other people have, it's a battle you can't win, ever. There's always going to be someone with a bigger house, a faster car, a fatter bank account. The only way to actually win is to just stop playing the game. The real skill here is to stop moving the goalposts on yourself, to decide what enough means for you.
And you know, knowing when you have enough is directly tied to this next point, which is so important. We tend to think that getting rich and staying rich are the same thing, that they take the same skills, but they don't at all. In fact, a lot of the time, they require completely opposite ways of thinking. Take the story of Jesse Livermore. He was, without a doubt, one of the greatest stock traders who ever lived. He was an absolute genius at getting rich. I mean, during the great crash of 1929, he made what would be $3 billion today in a single day. But all that success went to his head. He got overconfident, started taking crazier and crazier risks because he thought he was untouchable. And, well, he lost it all. Everything. He died bankrupt. The guy was a master at getting rich, but he had zero clue how to stay rich.
And Livermore's life really lays out the difference for us. Getting rich? Yeah, that often takes big risks, being optimistic, being bold. But staying rich, that's a whole different ballgame. It takes humility. It takes a little bit of fear, the healthy kind of fear that reminds you it can all disappear. It means you got to be patient and careful with what you've built.
So, let's pull all these threads together. We've got the patient janitor, we've got the lucky tech mogul, the overconfident trader. What's the one thing that connects all these stories? It really boils down to one word: survival.
See, good investing, real sustainable success, it's not about making these amazing genius-level decisions all the time. It's not about hitting home runs. It's really about consistently not screwing up. It's about playing defense and making sure you don't make a mistake that takes you completely out of the game.
This is exactly why someone like Warren Buffett has been so successful for so long. You could argue his real genius isn't in getting rich, it's in staying rich. He's lived through what, like 14 recessions? And he never panics. He doesn't chase fads, he doesn't get swept up in fear. His greatest skill is just durability. He survives. He just stays in the game, year after year.
And that's the bottom line. Survival is the #1 most important skill in finance. It just means you stick around long enough for your good decisions to pay off, for compounding to work its magic. It's all about making sure that one bad day or one bad decision doesn't wipe you out. That's what Ronald Reed, the janitor, understood. And that's why, in the long run, he won.
So when you boil it all down, these stories about Ronald Reed, Bill Gates, Jesse Livermore, they aren't really about finance. They're about psychology. They're about us. Which leaves me with one final question for you to think about. If you know that behavior is the most important piece of the puzzle, what's one small thing, one behavior that you could change starting today to help you stay in the game for the long haul?